essence, we were done the chapter. The Rebbe had a goal. The goal is to explain to you the essence point of your godly soul. What's the essence point? It's a piece of God. Well, everything's godly. I mean, my cell phone's also godly, true, but this isn't godly. This is from God's core and being. Every Jew, the soul of every Jew is from God's core and being. That's who you are. That's who every Jew is. And that was the beginning of the chapter. And like, wow, the world is spoken, we're blown, the world is speech, the Jew's soul is thought. By God, he and his thoughts are one. So the soul is one with God himself. And then we said, wait a minute. If the soul is truly like this, how come not every Jew looks like that? How come Jews might look very different than that? And we said, oh, let me tell you something. There's a process. And to understand that process, went to this very elaborate parable of the formation of a child to understand the process of how the souls all start out on the highest level of the highest world, seminal wisdom of the world of being, Chachma V'Atzilus, but then they travel. And how far they travel, that's determined by God and based really on the quality of the soul and how really the soul would ultimately use her powers when she's in this world. That's the duration of the trip. The longer the trip, the more covered over those soul powers become. But even a soul, we said, that goes through all the levels, there's 4 worlds and there's 900 levels on each world. So even a soul that makes 3,600 pit stops, and each stop is another constriction on powers, even such a soul, in the end, born on this world, still has an ability to reconnect to her origin point through the energy, the power of the tzaddik, of the greatest Jew in this world, of God's mouthpiece in this world, who still in this world didn't really travel so far from his origin. He is still metaphorically called the brain. He said that's what a Rebbe is. Reish Beis Yud, Rosh B'nai Yisrael, head of the Jewish people. Because he's still head. We all start off with gray matter, but some of us maybe became the toes. But that greatest soul, that Jew who's God's mouthpiece in this world, like the original Rebbe model, Moses himself, still a brain, still like his origin point. And through connecting to him, we connect back to our origin point and to that place where we are one with God. And the chapter should be over. I just summarized the chapter. Amazing, inspiring, who we are, who every Jew is. So what do we have this chunk at the end for? Well, we said the chunk at the end is because there's something in the Zohar, foundational Kabbalistic work, that seemingly negates the point of this chapter. Because the Zohar seems to imply that parents determine the quality of soul of their children. Why is that negating the point of this chapter? Because the soul is from above, right? That was our original definition of the soul. Chelek Eloka Mimal Mamish. A piece of God from above, literally. Mimal, from above. That's soul. So if I, as a parent, thank God I've been a parent many times over, if my thoughts and intentions during the conception of my child impacted the soul of that child's not determined from above, mima'al. He's affected by below. He's affected by me. He's affected by his parents. And the chapter is saying, no, the soul's a piece of God. Yes, souls look different because God determined what triptych each soul has and what destination point from those 3,600 levels each soul has. So God from above is determining the duration of the journey and therefore how covered over those souls' powers are. But nothing from this world is impacting the soul. It's a piece of God. So the Alter Rebbe is bringing in this piece of Zohar to clarify that parents do not determine the level of godliness of a soul. Soul is from above. Soul is from God. And also start at the same, and any differentiation in soul that we could see, so to speak, is God sending each soul on a different journey. Nothing from this world. Souls are way beyond this world. So that's why the Alter Rebbe, in a sense, he finished the chapter. Okay, put it as a side note, put it in parentheses. No, he's putting it in the body of the text because this is really important that no one should think that we are determining the quality of soul. Mima'al, it's from above. It's a piece of God, and anything about it is determined by God. So what we did last class was we read most of this, and we explained basically the Rebbe's answer. So what is the Alter Rebbe's answer? Because the Zohar is saying that parents determine the quality of soul. The sanctity of parents during conception determines soul. And the Alter Rebbe said, when the Zohar says soul, it doesn't mean soul in this context. It means the skin of the soul, the garment around the soul, which is how the soul interfaces with the world. And since it's skin, since it's the interface between the soul and the world, if you looked at it, so to speak, you look and you see, oh, that's soul. No, that's not really soul at all, actually. That's not soul at all. It's not really soul. It's not soul at all. What is it? It's actually a level of the animal soul. Well, it looks to me like soul. I never see it detached from the soul. Right, it's like the skin. You're not going to see it detached, right? Skin, largest organism of our body, is an organism. I mean, so to speak. There's the person under the skin, but you're never going to separate, hopefully, the skin from the person. So you're never going to separate the skin from the soul. So you're looking at it and saying, oh, soul, but no, it's skin. It's not soul matter, it's skin matter. And that skin matter is determined by the parent's sanctity during conception. So when parents conceive a child, of course, parents might not be aware they're conceiving a child, but when there's any potential, for sure, they really have to be very focused and have their minds and hearts in godly spaces, because doing so impacts how holy that skin will be. Well, it's not the soul anyway. What do I care? Well, it's not the soul, but it's the skin. So it's very significant because the soul is never going to be stripped away from her skin. All godliness that enters into the soul is coming through that skin. And all godliness that goes out from the soul to the world, to your thoughts and speech and feelings and actions, is going through that skin. So more sensitized, holier, more porous, more sensitive skin allows the godliness to flow in more easily, allows the godliness to flow out more easily. And parents' sanctity during conception determines that. So if someone was conceived in a very unholy fashion, there's a very thick skin, which means, practically speaking, it's harder. It's harder for the godliness to get in. It's harder for the godliness of the soul to get out. There's more resistance. It's more difficult. It's not natural. It doesn't flow. And if someone merited that their parents were in holy places during their conception, it's so natural. It's so porous. There's such a natural affinity. There's such a natural sensitivity to godliness. It just flows. It's porous, beautiful, refined skin. But again, this is skin. This isn't soul. This is actually, as we said, the highest level of your animal soul. We said the animal soul has the core animal soul, the nefesh habahani, the animal soul. Then there's a layer much more refined called the nefesh hachiyuni, the vital soul component of the animal soul. And then there's the top layer of the animal soul called the nefesh hasichli, the intellectual aspect of the animal soul. And that's the skin. And that's what's determined by the sanctity of parents. And if someone's parents were very sanctified, they have it much more natural to take the godliness in, to bring the godliness out. It's so natural to them serving God. It's so natural to feel this love and fear of God. They're blessed. They were born with a real silver spoon in their mouth. They were born with natural sanctity. And if someone wasn't, they have to work harder. Can you clean up your own skin? You can, but it's more challenging. But you can. And as we see, and as the Rebbe is going to say, you can see very holy people born to very not holy parents. So obviously those parents did not draw down that soul, but the parents did determine the garment, and the garment is not good, but the person with their own soul power cleaned up their garment. So they're not limited by that at all. So that's a summary. I sort of told two of the three powers of that intellectual soul, that skin that the Zohar is talking about. The third point was also, of course, being that intermediary facilitator between the godly soul and the animal soul, because it speaks both languages. Like the godly soul, it wants to ascend, transcend. The godly soul wants to transcend itself to be one with God, and the intellectual soul wants to transcend itself intellectually to get the greatest pleasure, the pleasure of greater and greater comprehension. So it speaks the same language as the godly soul. They both want to go up, though for different reasons. And the intellectual soul, this highest edge of the animal soul, definitely speaks the language of the animal soul. It's a part of the animal soul. What's the commonality? Pleasure thinking. The animal soul's whole desires for pleasure. Well, the intellectual soul, the skin also only wants pleasure, but it understands the greatest pleasure is the pleasure of the mind. So this intellectual soul can say, the godly soul wants the ultimate pleasure, transcending self, being one with God. The animal soul, transcending self, one with God, I just want to eat. Well, you want pleasure, but guess what? The godly soul also wants pleasure. Because the godly soul is getting a greater pleasure than your chocolate or your ice cream or your steak. Godly soul has the deepest pleasure, pleasure in God. That's the best pleasure. That's a pleasure. It's the ultimate pleasure. And that's how it can facilitate the joining of the godly and the animal. Meaning, when we serve God, sometimes we serve God and it's really hard for us. Like, I don't think I have to lecture on this. We probably all know times when serving God is hard for us. We can all give our own examples. We serve God and it's hard. We serve God and it's challenging. We serve God and we don't want to do it. And then we all have times when we serve God and it's amazing and we love it. And we just want to keep doing this and doing this and doing this. And those are two different types of service. When we serve God and we do not want to do this. I do not want to daven. You know, it's like, there's so much to do and daven is going to take me and I don't have time. And God wants me to daven. So I am sacrificing my will for God's will. Literally, by the way, that's called self-sacrifice, Mesiras Nefesh. We hear that beautiful, lofty term, Mesiras Nefesh. And we think of Jews that martyred themselves and died for God's name. That's true. But every day, all day long, when we do what we don't want to do for God, we are also literally, the Alter discusses this in Tanya, this is Mesiras Nefesh, this is self-sacrifice. And this is serving God as his slave, as his servant. This is serving God with the spiritual service called iskafia, the crushing of my animal nature. I don't want to do this. I crush my nature and do what God wants instead. I am self-sacrificing. We're coming from Yud Shvat, and of course in the Maimar of Yud Shvat, the Rebbe Rayatz and the Rebbe keep coming back to this theme of how our crushing and transforming evil is what creates Mashiach, is what brings God back down on planet Earth. So every time you don't want to do something, amazing, great, what an opportunity. You know, there's a vignette with the third Lubavitch Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. Someone once came to him and said, you know, Rebbe, what can I do? I don't want to learn. And the Rebbe said, wow, you're so lucky. Like Nebuch, me, I only want to learn. And he wasn't being facetious and he wasn't making a joke. He meant it very seriously. You don't want to learn? What an opportunity. Every time you learn, you're giving God such intense pleasure. You're doing a skafia. You're crushing the evil. You're transforming yourself. Me, Nebuch, I like to learn. You know, I'm just doing my thing. So every time God wants us to do something and we don't want to do it, what an opportunity. Iskafia, crushing the evil. Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, being God's slave, being God's servant. Amazing. But then there's another entire service of God, which is, so to speak, when you and God are on the same page. When you have pleasure in doing what God wants you to do. Not when you're God's slave, but when you're God's child. When your pleasure is in God. And this is what we're talking about here when I'm saying that this skin of the soul, the highest level of the animal soul, called the Nefesh HaSichli, the intellectual soul, that part that is determined by the sanctity of parents during conception, that can facilitate and get the animal soul to be on board with the godly soul. You want pleasure. I also want pleasure. And you know what? The greatest pleasure is serving God. So we all have different places where we feel that. It's very personalized, of course, where we just feel such pleasure in this service. We have such joy in helping another person. We have such joy in giving charity. We have such joy in praying or in saying Psalms or in studying Torah, in learning a new law and being able to fulfill it. And like, wow, this is so cool. Until now, I thought this was the blessing on rice cakes. And now I found out this is the blessing. So exciting. A new way to serve you, God. Now I'm doing it right. This is literally true. My whole life I was saying the wrong blessing. Rice cakes is adama. I always thought it was shahako. So that's a pleasure. That feels good. That's great. That's not iskafia. That's not crushing. That's me, my godly soul, my animal soul, facilitated by my intellectual soul, being like, this is pleasure. This is pleasure in God. So which is better? God wants, needs, and appreciates both. And we all, I'm sure, have healthy doses of both. Because I'm sure we all have things that we have to really self-sacrifice and are really hard for us. And that's true for all of us. So it must be true for all of us. And we all have things, hopefully, we all have those pieces that give us such joy. As human beings, we love Shabbos. I love Shabbos, best day of my week. I love it. I'm a human. As a human being, I love Shabbos. God loves Shabbos. I love Shabbos too. Now, if I wasn't a religious Jew, would I do any of these things that are so smart to do? Of course not. I had a class today, and with women that are not religious at all. And one of them was asking me like this, so to speak, about I won't use the language she said, but the Jewish laws of intimacy. She said it a little differently. And I said, fine, we can talk about that. It was all women. As long as it's all women, I'm comfortable. God put the right words in my mouth to really rationally explain how beautiful are God's laws of intimacy for us. And they're so beautiful. But of course, there's pieces that are way beyond our understanding, are not because we appreciate them and they make our marriage better and our relationship with our husbands better. But there's also that piece we can appreciate as human beings. So when you're appreciating Shabbos as a human being who benefits from Shabbos, when you're appreciating the laws of marital relationships, of family purity, as a human being who appreciates that, when you appreciate the laws of modesty, as a woman who appreciates not being objectified and being treated as a human being and expressing herself as a person and not an object, our animal soul and our godly soul are on the same place. We're both enjoying the same thing for very different reasons. The animal soul for pleasure, the godly soul for connection and transcendence and being one with God, but we're on the same page. And that's that third component of the godly soul, of the skin of the soul, of the intellectual soul, to get the animal soul on the page of the godly soul by bringing us to understand that there's no greater pleasure than serving God. Some things we naturally feel the pleasure, some things we have to acquire and appreciate, but there's no greater pleasure than serving God. It's good to self-reflect yourself. Where are those spaces of mind where it feels so good to be a Jew? It feels so good to be one with God, because that's what we're talking about. So looking on further in the chapter, we see, if we're looking inside, that we're not done. So what's the rest of the lines here? Because the Rebbe, again, is coming to prove now, this was the whole point of going into all this officially. I'm sure, of course, there's tremendous benefit in emphasizing in the very beginning of Tanya the importance of sanctity during relationships. But we're doing this to prove that when we look at that Zohar, and it says the parents are determining soul, it doesn't mean soul, it means skin of soul. And now I'll explain to you why skin of soul can be called soul, because it's never separated, because all godliness coming in and all godliness coming out, and it's all through the skin. And that's why you could think it's soul, but it's actually skin of soul, because we do not determine soul. Parents do not determine soul. It's chelek Eloka mima'al mamish. Literally above, it's a piece of God, and any factor of it is determined by God. And what the Rebbe now wants to say is, let me prove this to you. So going on, the Rebbe says, Aval haneshama atzma, but the soul herself, hine lefa'amim, sometimes, nishmas adam gavoa le'ein kates, the soul of a person who's so high, such an exalted person, comes, lios bino, to be the child, shel adam nivza v'shafel chule, of a very, very low person. As the Arizal explains all this in his Likutei Torah and Parshas Vayera, and his Tamei Mitzvos on Parshas Bereishis. Meaning, the Rebbe says, I told you this. When the Zohar says soul, it doesn't mean soul, it means the skin of the soul, the intellectual soul, which is determined by the parent's sanctity. And I'm telling you why, and I'm telling you how it's never separating, and I'm telling you its functions. And you could say, well, listen, Alter Rebbe, I mean, we believe you completely. We know you know what you're talking about. But what about someone who's studying the Tanya and doesn't have that absolute faith in the Alter Rebbe and says, I don't know, Alter Rebbe, the Zohar says soul. You're saying, well, the Zohar says soul, but doesn't mean soul. I mean, the Zohar says soul. So the Alter Rebbe says, it's a very simple proof, very simple proof. Think of how many people of such godly stature are born to very, very low-level parents, to people that were the very opposite of God. So if parents determine the sanctity of soul, how in the world, most classical example, was Abraham born to his father and mother, right? Go right to the start of the Jewish nation. Abraham. Who were his parents? What was his yichus? What was his lineage? Well, his father and mother were like huge symbols of anti-God. Of course, we know about the father. The father's name was Terach, and Terach was the pusher of idolatry, right? We all know the story of his idol shop. It wasn't like a little dinky idol shop. No, he was big. He was huge, and he was pushing idolatry. That was his father. All right, that's yichus on your father's side. What about your mother? What we know about his mother is that her name was Amislay, which if you spell it out in the Hebrew, Aleph Mem Saf Lamed Aleph, breaks down into two words. Emes loy, not true, aka false. Now, a name expresses essence. So the essence of his mother was falseness. His father was the idol pusher. And these two people were so sanctified in their conception of Abraham that they brought the father of monotheism into the world, like not by a million years. So what happened? Where's the system? How did this work? The Alter Rebbe said, this is because parents do not determine the sanctity of soul. The sanctity of Abraham's soul had about zero to do with his parents. Who determined the soul of an Abraham? A soul that did not leave that first world of being in probably, well, we know he was from Chesed of Atzilus. He started off in seminal wisdom, Chachma, went on to Bina, to Das, and Chesed of Atzilus, right? Probably the only soul we know of that comes from such a high level, the highest world and the fourth floor on that highest world. Determined by Terach and Amislay? Determined by God. So what did Terach and Amislay have to do with him? Oh, well, they gave him very, very dirty garments. The skin of his soul was black. But with such a soul, he was able to purify those garments. Well, why would God do that? I mean, why didn't God look for nobody was really serving God too much at that time, but the highest, best, purest from the lot. Why did he go to these arch villains? Well, sometimes God does that. Meaning sometimes the holy souls are given to parents deserving or parents capable of raising and nurturing such souls. And sometimes the holy souls go into the lowest environments. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, when you go out, like, in the world of Chabad, we go what we call miftsayim, and we're going out to non-religious areas, to non-religious people, and we're trying to connect them to God. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, when you do this, recognize that possibly these souls are much greater than you. These people you're speaking of that are so ignorant of Judaism that know nothing, very possibly they're much higher than you. And that's why God could allow them to grow up in such areas. But your soul needed to be a little more, nurtured and protected because it's not as strong. So again, it could go in either direction. You could have very high souls, gifted to very high level people, to be raised in a very rarefied environment and to fill the world with their light. And you could have very high souls that are put in very dark places. Why would God put a high soul in a dark place? Well, basically, it sort of works on three levels: God's level, the forces of evil's level, and the soul's level. From God's perspective, starting off from God, why would God do this to a piece of himself and such a high level piece of himself? Because God has a need. Because this area, this piece of darkness has to be refined. So when you take a soul and put the soul in that darkness, and the soul comes out of that darkness, the soul is extracting the sparks embedded in that darkness. Now, there's a rule, one of God's rules, which means God doesn't demand from us what we're not capable of. We might sometimes think he's overestimating us, but actually what he gives us, we can handle, because he only gives you what you can handle. So if God has this evil, that the good in it has to be extracted, that the evil has to be rejected, what type of soul can he put in that place? Only a soul that has the power to handle it. Only a soul that has the power to extract those sparks. And we look today at this transformation of the world through what we call the Baal Tshuva movement. We look at so many people Some of them who came, not all of them, but some of them, many of them, who came from such darkness. And when they got out of that darkness, they extracted the sparks embedded in that darkness. There's a woman I met many years ago. She's a Chabad woman. She lives in Tzfas. Her name is Tova Mordechai. And she wrote many years ago her autobiography. I think they called it Playing with Fire. And basically, she's saying how she was raised. Her father was a fundamentalist Christian preacher, and she was raised in an intensely fundamentalist Christian environment for like the first, I don't remember, 18, 20 years of her life. And thank God, she got out, and she's a Chabad Lubavitcher woman living in Tzfas. When she got out, imagine the sparks embedded in that evil of Christianity that she released through her journey. And that's true for every Baal Tshuva. And that's true for all of us, in a sense, for whatever the evils are that we were placed into. So God has a need. He has a need for this area to be refined, for the sparks to be released, for the good to be extracted, for the evil to be rejected. And to do that, he needs a soul that has the ability, because he can't unfairly demand it of a soul that can't. And even if he could be unfair, which God wouldn't and couldn't, what would he gain? If you put a soul there that's not strong enough, they're never going to be able to get out. So God has to take his strongest soul sometimes, like an Avraham, to a Terach and a Misle. That's from God's end. Now, from the forces of evil end, when they see a high-level soul, oh, they don't want that soul coming to planet Earth. No way is that soul coming in. Okay, so God, like the compromise is, okay, we'll bring the soul there. And they're like, oh, there? In that hole? In that horrible area? Oh, okay, we'll let the soul go there. Ha, ha, ha. So the forces of evil are saying, yeah, God, you want to bring the soul in? You can send the soul down there. Of course, not understanding the ploy that is exactly where God needs that soul to go. But also from the soul's end, everything has to be fair. From the soul's end, every soul is here for God's needs, which are also for the soul's needs. Every soul is here to do many things, including come to complete, I'll call it self-actualization, meaning to completely utilize all your powers, all your muscles, all your abilities to become that flaming fire of God that every soul is capable of being, each soul on her level. So you have these intently powerful souls going into those places, and coming out of them is their journey to actualize their own muscles that would not have been expressed in a holier, purer environment. So this is really God's needs, so to speak, the power of evil, getting around them's needs, and really for the soul as well. And we see this throughout our history. We look sometimes, of course, some people are very, very holy people from very, very holy parents, and that's a different reason. But like we could see in our history, like Reb Meir, one of the greatest of the sages, he was a convert of Edom, a convert coming from the evil, and the evil of a nation like Edom. Rabbi Akiva, we say, Kulu alibad Rabbi Akiva, everything follows Rabbi Akiva. He comes from converts also, which means, again, that he's extracting that energy of that nation and giving it to God. So what type of a soul to be able to do that? And then, of course, we see this very, very, very strongly in the whole lineage of Mashiach. And we're looking at the line of Mashiach. The line of Mashiach is a bunch of very strange stories. Stories we can explain, stories we study, stories we have lots of commentary to understand how each one actually really was kosher and actually really was godly. But that's the lineage of Mashiach, that each story we have to explain and use this commentary and this source and study and delve and answer this question, answer this question. I mean, God, you could have just made it straight. I mean, this is the lineage of Mashiach. But again, this powerful, powerful energy going through the back door. So we start with the story of Yehuda and Tamar, and then we have Ruth and Boaz. We have the conception of King David himself, who for years was viewed as and thought he was a mamzer, which he wasn't, but that was the back door of his birth, the soul of King David, in a sense, one of the 5 greatest souls we ever had in this world, being raised as if he was a mamzer. You have, of course, David and Bathsheba. So the Gemara says, David whoever would think David sinned is making a huge mistake, but that's what it looked like. Shlomo and Naama. We just have story after story after story, because again, sometimes to get the holiest energy in the world, this is actually the best road to do it. So we can see this in many other things besides souls. There's a special power in, like, as we said, the transformation. When Jacob received the blessings from his father, he had to, so to speak, steal them. There was a certain power that was happening by that act. First leader of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, whose Tanya, of course, we're studying, he would speak of like the stolen moments that he learned with, it's called the Malach, the son of the Maggid of Mezrich. He was so holy, he was called an angel. And he had his official time, but he turned back the clock to have a few more stolen moments of learning with him, and how precious and sweet and the power of those stolen moments. So the power, a soul of Mashiach himself, specifically coming through these back doors. So this is this final point the Rebbe is saying here, again, proving we take it on faith. But for anyone that doesn't want to take it on faith, fear not. Look at our history. You can look at Abraham himself, or as I'm saying, you could look at all these other stories and say sometimes, these parents produced this child? No. Guess what? The Zohar does not mean the soul. The Zohar means the layer around the soul. And that is determined by the parents. And with that, we end the chapter. Any thoughts, any questions on this? I know I just spoke straight for a long time and a lot of quiet.
I'll say one thing. It's Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
That all, everything that you said, like our lineage, if you have to put Yiddishkeit into one word, it's called real. Because it's all about people that are real, and people who, even though they're on maybe a different plane than your average Yid, it's still about people, and it just makes everything so real and believable.
That's true. That's a very important point. You're right. You're absolutely right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Any other thoughts or questions or comments on what we just said?
Yes, ma'am. This is such an amazing show. Wow. uh, you know, that I raised my three boys with a father who was so anti. I couldn't have anything. And I see the struggle of my kids. And so, I told my son that he actually chose, because he asked, why didn't he allow me to run for the bar mitzvah, and why he didn't allow this, and what, because he's now asking questions. And I said, you chose to come into this family in order to experience and come out of it, in a better place, and to do your correction, to do your tikkun, so yeah, it's amazing, because all my children were born into a home that was not welcoming Judaism, unfortunately, and but they're very, very connected, Baruch Hashem.
So what you're saying is, based on this concept, that your sons probably have very high souls, that God sent them to an environment where they had to contend with a parent who was not allowing them to connect to their heritage. Exactly. And because of their soul powers, they were able to overcome that and extract the godliness from that whole, we'll call it leftist mentality.
Yes.
And take out all those sparks that are embedded in there.
Yeah. And the miracle is that I went to visit him last week. And so he brought me some of my jewelries and stuff. And there was a Star of David over there. And he said, Ima, I really like this. Can I have it? And I said, sure. Then last night and it has Shema Israel on it, a small, So last night, all of a sudden, I remember I said, this was yours. It was given to you by my mother for your bar mitzvah.
Wow.
And oh my gosh, she was so
Wow.
touched by it, so happy. So yeah, Baruch Hashem.
Wow.
So it made the circle and it came back to him.
Wow.
So immediately he put it on,
Wow.
So Baruch Hashem.
Wow. That's a beautiful circle that should continue and spiral higher and higher and higher.
Amen, amen.
Like Rachel is saying, these ideas aren't like textbook. They're real life. And in real life, we deal with these things. And it's so beautiful and reassuring. And sometimes you could say, why did my child or whoever, or myself, or someone else I love, why did I or that person or they, why did they have to go through that environment? Like, what was God thinking? Why would he do that to a piece of himself? And this could be what God was thinking. Yeah, I know it's hard. You're not doing it alone. I'm with you. And you're just such a powerful soul because I need this portion of the world refined. I need this godliness extracted. You know, the famous story with the Baal Shem Tov, with the whole thing with a brook, and they washed their hands and they prayed the afternoon service. And the Baal Shem Tov said, this brook has waited since the beginning of time for a Jew to serve God with its waters. So you don't need attention. I mean, you pray the afternoon prayer every day, you daven mincha every day, and you rinse your hands before you daven mincha, and there's a brook of water, and you're rinsing your hands, and you're davening mincha, and you don't know that this brook has been waiting for thousands of years for its energy to be extracted, for it to be used to serve God. So this is just really the truth of like a lot of people's existence. For a lot of people, this is like, oh, that aha moment of like, oh, that's why. Oh, that's what's going on. And it's really beautiful to be able to like sometimes, connect the dots and really, really understand sometimes on a very different level what's going on. Anyone else? Any other questions? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I have a question. Am I on?
Yes.
Hi, it's Leah Hespel.
Hi, Leah. So glad you made it.
How do you explain something that seems to me like the opposite phenomenon when you have the opposite? Here you're talking about souls coming into difficult situations where maybe at conception they had, all that kind of explanation. I get that. How about what you see common today where there are those who come into very pure environments and then they lose their way, or they're looking and seeking out different cultures, or just are not happy with where they're coming from? I know it's times of Mashiach and they're not at fault, but how would you explain that in this
context? I hear your question. It's unfortunately a very good question. Unfortunately, I have to say I'm sad to say it's a very good question. And I'm going to answer it in the context of what we're discussing. Why I'm putting that disclaimer is just like if you would say, what's the reason why people, to use the colloquial term, go off the derech? Someone gave me a book, I think it's called like Going Off the Derech. And it was a sociologist who was writing a sociological study on why people go off the derech. And even though I read everything, I actually didn't really get it. Was a little hard, a little boring for me, so to speak, but it was a very important point the author was making, because she interviewed all these people, like the professionals and the victims, and everyone has their perspective. Oh, it's because didn't make it in school, bullied, bad relationship with parents, lack of harmony in the home, whatever. Everyone had their answers and could prove it with like 20 different case studies. But there's all these answers and they all have truth to them. So in other words, there's many nuances to why. But I'm going to answer you exactly as you're asking me in the perspective of this chapter, which is deeper than wasn't in a good school that was a good fit, problems in the home, those type of answers, which also have a level of truth. There's many levels of truth. On a soul level, the Lubavitcher Rebbe has an amazing talk where he speaks of people that leave Yiddishkeit, people, like you're saying, that were raised in and go out. And the Rebbe says that, what's this doing? Why does this happen? Like, what's going on here? And the Rebbe says, and of course also very positive as the Lubavitcher Rebbe is, that every one of these people that leave, they're all coming back. They left, they saw something in the world that was drawing them, maybe something in the world they were in they didn't like, and something in the outer world that seemingly had allure, seemingly was like, wow, that's what I want. That's where I'll find happiness. That's where I'll find pleasure. That's where I'll find fulfillment and self-actualization. And they go. And it tastes good. It tastes sweet. They enjoy it. And then eventually, sooner or later, they're like, it might still taste sweet, but it's not worth it because I love God more. And they come back. And the Rebbe says that every one of these people is the greatest testimony to a Jew's relationship with God. Because if you take someone that was born religious, raised religious, stayed religious, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. And they're living their life for God, and that's amazing. And that is amazing. But that person doesn't prove what is a Jew's relationship to God, because we don't know. I mean, this is the environment they were born in. This is the environment they know. This is the environment they appreciate. They appreciate serving God. This works for them serving God. This feeds them serving God. So we don't really know what's the depth of their commitment to God. But when someone leaves and comes back, that shows a Jew's relationship to God. They left. And it's not like they left and had a horrible time and it was a disaster and they ran home to the safety of, no. They left, they saw what they wanted, they got it. And after a while they realized, but they want God more. So putting that talk of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I'm giving over in brief a talk of the Lubavitcher Rebbe from 1 year Simchas Torah, I believe, talk. Putting that in the context of this chapter, to answer your question in the context of this chapter, that just like a soul could be sent to a very dark environment to extract the sparks, and that soul needs to be strong enough to get in there and get out and release those sparks. Is it possible that very strong souls, because of all the trappings around them, like God is pulling the strings, they're making their own choices, but God creates situations that facilitate their choice to leave the environment, to go into the darkness of this world, and then to bring back all that sparks, all that energy. When they say, I wanted it, I got it, it tastes good, and I'm leaving it all. I'm rejecting it all because I want God more. That, the Rebbe says, is the proof of a Jew's relationship with God. And maybe those souls are the ones God sent on that journey to both release those sparks and express what is a soul, what is a relationship with God. I remember once looking at someone, like a very specific person, in going through what you're discussing and saying, like, you know, God, it's not fair. If you only, so this was a girl, I'm saying if a girl or boy, if she just got, like, after seminary, she was, you know, she would, okay, so I'm giving you actually a very specific example, but it's sort of indicative and it's a little bit of a different slant, but in essence, the same point. Looking at a very specific person I was close to, like, God, she went through the system. Okay, she wasn't stellar. There's a lot of chilled religious people there. And she went to seminary. Hey, she left seminary like many girls wanting to get married. She was looking for another chilled religious boy. Okay. She would have stayed religious. And she was willing. And she wasn't rejecting and leaving it. And you didn't let. Because you didn't let her find her husband. Instead of getting married, staying in the fold, and staying chilled religious and raising a Jewish family within the basic framework of Judaism, a weaker version, but still within the basic framework, you didn't let, because she didn't get married. So you facilitated that she left it all. Why would you do that, God? And I said to myself, to God, because you didn't want this precious soul to be chilled and serve you like that. You said this soul has the power to come home for real. This soul's going to serve me for real. It's a harder road. But when you go that harder road and you come back, it's for real. It's expressing a deep connection. And you trust the soul enough, and you know the power of the soul enough that that's the road you're setting out for them. And I think that's part of the answer to your very true question.
I just want to add in regard to what we just spoke about. There are hundreds of thousands of this kind of Jews in Eretz Israel who came from, Morocco, Yemen, and they grew up until a certain age as frum, and then they just, came out of it, and now they're coming back. And you can see it. It's amazing in every corner of Israel. So
there's an amazing movement in Israel, and very much accelerated by what's happened since October 7th. That really is showing, like, the statistics are amazing. The statistics are amazing. What's going on in transforming people in terms of their expression of their belief in God and their practical observance of the commandments. Absolutely, you're very right. Well, we finished chapter 2, Mazel Tov. Next week we'll begin chapter 3. And